Oscar Piastri going to drive for McLaren next year. Alpine have lost their appeals.
Alpine really did such a bad job there, investing so many millions into Piastri's career just to then not have him locked up in a contract, you know, and for him to be able to go away and take an offer from McLaren. It is going to be tough for Oscar to do well there because Lando is world class, you know, he's world championship material there. It's not going to be that easy.
Oscar Piastri wins the sprint to take McLaren to the top step once again. He's taking that McLaren to the top step of the podium. Oscar Piastri wins for the first time in Formula One.
Woo! I've been meaning to make this one for a minute. So, as the thumbnail suggests, we want to know whether Piastri can become world champion as early as next year. Well, nobody knows for certain at this point. But with the trajectory that McLaren have been on and Piastri's rate of improvement, we can say at least the guy's got a pretty good chance, right? There's been a lot of hype around this kid recently. People saying that he's already better than Lando and how he's going to beat his teammate next year. And while it's true that he has significantly improved in the span of just 1 year, has he done enough to warrant this much hype? To me, yes, and here's why. On screen, we can see a chart showing the average gap between Norris and Piastri for every qualifying and sprint qualifying session from 2023. I went back and watched every session just to understand the context behind some of the gaps, because some of them were just enormous. But you'll notice the points for both Canada and Mexico are 0 for both drivers. Essentially, I just didn't include these plots since Oscar crashed in Q3 in Canada, and the gap was over 3 seconds. And then in Mexico, there was a yellow flag in Sector 1 that ruined Norris's lap and caused him to be eliminated in Q1 over 3 seconds off his teammate. Since both of these sessions weren't that representative, I decided not to include them. Otherwise, we can split this graph up into 3 sections. The first section is the period where McLaren's car straight up just stank. They were often getting eliminated in Q1, sprinkled with some reliability issues on a Sunday. But all things considered, given this was just the first 9 races of Oscar's Formula 1 career, he was actually very decent. The average gap between him and Lando during this period was just over 0.2 of a second. But again, note that this doesn't include Canada because it was an outlier. Another thing that we should consider is that throughout the entire Austria weekend, only Lando was running the latest edition of upgrades that brought McLaren into contention for podiums. And it's crazy how at this point of the season, Mercedes had now been overtaken by 2 customer teams. I know Toto must have been sat there watching mad as hell, just like Homelander. But we get to the second portion of Piastri's 2023 season, and this is where bro starts to cook. And it's over this stretch of races where the Australian scores 80% of his points. Now he had the full set of upgrades like his teammate, he knew it was time to lock in. Silverstone, he qualified 3rd and should have got a podium had it not been for a poorly timed safety car. Hungary, he gets a great start, but struggles with tyre degradation. This is something that a lot of people have already talked about being one of Oscar's biggest weaknesses, and we'll delve more into this as the video progresses. 1 week later, we find out he's a Belgian merchant, as he took sprint pole before getting edged by Verstappen. And other than his misjudged error at turn 1, he pretty much outperformed Lando the entire weekend for the first time all year. There's a couple other highlights during that period of time which we won't yap about for too long. In summary, he gets his first pole and win in the Qatar sprint race and gets a nice podium in Japan. Still, race pace and tyre management are a bit of a problem since he was forced to let Lando through in Suzuka. But again, we're going to let it slide. It's only his first season after all. The average gap between them also during that period was much closer, just over 200ths in Norris's favour. Again, I had to remove another race from this average, this time it was Singapore. Lance Stroll tried to impress his dad by making it out of Q1, but sadly, he overcooked it. Thankfully he was alright, but nobody behind him could finish a lap, including Piastri. The third part of 2023 for the Australian was probably the worst in my opinion. And when you look at the list of tracks, it makes sense why he was on average 0.3 slower in qualifying than Norris. He was basically nowhere in Austin while Lando was fighting for P2, track was bumpy and difficult to adapt to. Mexico, he was beefing with Yuki Tsunoda and every time they went wheel to wheel, they couldn't help themselves but touch each other up.
Pause.
Brazil was another tough weekend and given it was a sprint, there was almost no time to practice. He also got taken out on lap 1 in the race. There was one highlight though I particularly enjoyed which came during the sprint. Peep game.
Give me a shot and I swear I shoot like Berettas. Back and I'm better than ever.
I know this was just a textbook switchback move, but I don't care. This will always look fire to me. He reclaimed that position in the coldest way possible. And that's a trait of his that he's carried throughout his entire life. Cool, calm, and collected. Shout out to the Red Flags podcast. I was listening to their episode with Oscar's mum, Nicole Piastri, and I learned a lot about his upbringing and what he was like as a kid. She told a story of a time when she took him to some kids concert, and as everyone is dancing and enjoying the party, bro is just locked in, probably thinking to himself, why am I here? I'd rather be racing. He really just spawned with a Mamba mentality. I know Kobe would be proud. Also, learning he was a fellow cars enjoyer touched a nerve in my soul. This is my twin right here. There was a part of the interview where she said, every single move he makes is calculated. I don't know another kid who is as measured as him. And having watched him over the past season and a half in F1, I can only really point to one moment where he maybe got slightly overambitious. In hindsight, he shouldn't have stuck his nose in here, but when you think about it, that's really the only semi-major error he's made while fighting wheel to wheel. Nicole Piastri, this was a great take. We need you on Sky Sports F1 immediately. Watching Oscar overtake is like listening to Dave, because this man is in his bag every single time. While Max and Lando are crashing into each other out front, my guy Piastri is doing signs like this.
This is absolutely unbelievable stuff.
It was perfect. Perfect.
I do wonder what could have been had he not exceeded track limits in qualifying and got his time deleted. Probably would have won the race instead of Russell. But having said that, we wouldn't have seen such clean overtakes. And he hit this not once, but twice, earlier on in the race against Perez at the same corner. To have that level of racing awareness and IQ is already impressive in itself, but to have it at such a young age is insane. Oscar's behaviour both on and off the track goes far beyond his years. Last year in Singapore, Martin Brundle decided to ask him a question before the race. But then...
Oscar, bad luck in qualifying, you've got some work to do in the race. Yeah, we'll try our best to see if we can get Esteban.
I'm out, man.
He's gone. Sorry, I missed him.
Really, bruh? If I'm in Oscar's shoes, next time Brundle tries to speak to me, I'm hitting one of these. But he brushed it off, had a laugh about it, and kept things pushing. This guy has the maturity of a veteran driver, and he's only in his second season. Over the past 4 races, Piastri is tied for the most points scored with 80. The man he's tied with is this guy. Like I said, Austria would have been his if qualifying had gone his way. Stuff like this really annoys me, because he's barely over the white line. But hey, rules are rules and they apply to everyone, so I can't complain. Silverstone should have been better too. I don't know why McLaren left him out an extra lap when everyone was coming in for Inters. Before that, he was driving so nicely, went clean around the outside of Russell, took a beautiful line through Beckett's to set up an overtake on Hamilton. And then towards the point of crossover, he was hounding Norris. He looked so confident, and given another lap, I think he would have been passed. But the team decided to leave him out, and that put him way behind everyone else for the rest of the race. In the final stint though, he was the fastest guy out there, so it really was a missed opportunity. Hungary, he took a deserving win, and there's a small minority of Norris fans who claim it was a gifted win. No, it wasn't. Oscar got the better start, managed his race perfectly. Lando was given the opportunity to undercut him by stopping earlier. And track position is extremely important in Hungary, as it's very difficult to overtake. McLaren put Oscar at a disadvantage with the strategy, and made up for it by inverting the cars. But I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty awkward to watch. Oscar was chill about it at the end as always. He was even apologetic for no reason. Like bro, you did nothing wrong. This was on your team. This win should have been celebrated way more and not been overshadowed by a bunch of drama that could have been avoided. One thing I wanted to point out about that race win is the notable difference in his tyre management. Remember how I said earlier in the video that last year at the same race, it was a big problem for him. Killer in his words. You can do the best starts and first stints in the world, but if you can't hang on for the next stint, it doesn't matter. So he learned from his mistakes, came back a year later, and won the Grand Prix. Mind you, with a broken rib. This image is from the 8th of July, which is a day after Silverstone. I thought what Sainz did in Australia was super impressive. I mean, it was. But Oscar mate, you can't be dropping this kind of thing so casually. This guy is the definition of built different. Belgium was another cold race from him. One tiny criticism that I have though is him going too long in his box on his second pit stop. That cost him a couple of seconds which could have been the race win, because his pace was on another level. And after seeing how good he was there as a rookie last year, it seems he's a master around Spa. Looking back to moments earlier in the year, Jeddah was a superb drive where he finished P4. He was running third at his home race, but McLaren decided to invert the cars as Lando was faster at the time. Japan wasn't great from him and he had damage in China, but that race was a big turning point, and in the words of team principal Andrea Stella, his development accelerated tremendously. Miami, he was running second and was matching Verstappen's lap times even without the full set of upgrades that Lando had. He came into the pits on the same lap that the safety car was deployed, which couldn't have been worse timing. I guess he was also frustrated by that and ended up getting damage while battling Carlos, which is fair enough. After that, he qualified second in Imola, but unfortunately got a grid penalty for impeding Kevin Magnussen. Monaco, he qualified second again and finished behind his fellow relative. Canada, he was consistently fighting for the podium, but towards the end, when there was a safety car, McLaren opted not to stop their drivers, whereas Mercedes did. And at that point, since it was old tyres against new tyres, it was pretty much a GG. Still though, a top 5 finish, and looking at the bigger picture, he was holding his own all race. Spain, he was pretty much nowhere all weekend. but that's the only outlier in the past 9 races where he's elevated to a different level. Such an improvement rate makes you think, just how much better can Piastri get? In my opinion, I think he has a higher ceiling than Norris, I genuinely do. Last video, I made fun of Lando just for the bants, but to be clear, I consider him a world-class talent. It's very small mistakes that ruin his chances of winning under pressure, but that's something I think he will learn to overcome. Seeing how Oscar has rapidly reached the level of his teammate though is an indication of how scary his potential is. I still think he's slightly off in terms of race pace in comparison to Lando, but it's very marginal. Although having said that, Belgium would say otherwise, Hungary the same, and Silverstone as well. But 3 races isn't a large enough sample size. I'll be watching him very closely over the remaining 10 races, and I think if he can continue asserting himself as a serious threat, we'll be talking about a potential candidate for the Drivers' Championship next year. Obviously, that depends on whether McLaren can maintain the advantage they currently have, but assuming that's the case, Oscar has ice water in his veins. He rarely ever gets flustered, which is a fundamental trait in becoming a world champion. His maturity and composure is what has brought him this far, and it has the potential to take him a lot further. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are on Oscar down in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.